Welcome to Friday. Welcome to the Morning Pitt. Welcome to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Welcome to That's All the Things. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com here with you on a Friday to jump into this week's Morning Pitt Mailbag. It's my favorite day of the week. Hopefully it's your favorite day of the week. I'm sure it is for a lot of reasons, and hopefully the mailbag is one of them. Even if it's not, I hope we can give you at least 20 minutes of fun Pitt sports talk this morning. Real quick before we start, there's been a topic of conversation on the message boards about this, and I think probably Pitt fans are talking to each other about it. Pitt is 5-0 right now. They're ranked in the top 25. They're number 22. They're welcoming Cal to Acrisure Stadium tomorrow, 3:30 kickoff. Huge game, big opportunity for Pitt to get to 6-0 for the first time in 40 years. It's all right there. They could potentially be a top 20 program by the time they play their next game after tomorrow if they can win. There's a lot going on. Eli Holstein's getting tons of hype. Desmond Reed is awesome. Pitt's defense is coming up with big plays. There's a lot going right for Pitt right now, and yet it feels like crickets in the local sports scene. And I just want to address it real quick because you have to understand the reality. All right, and it's unfortunate for Pitt, but it is the reality. That despite Pitt's 5-0 start, despite two fourth-quarter comeback wins and a win in a place where they've never won before and an undefeated record, 5-0 for the first time in 30-plus years, and despite all the things that are going well for Pitt right now, next door in the building in the South Side, there is A, a two-game losing streak, B, a quarterback controversy, and C, a player who is not, quote, playing the right way. My friends, that is talk radio catnip. You can't. It's crack in terms of sports talk radio in Pittsburgh, and there's nothing you can do to compete with that. Pitt football could go to the North Shore, could bane Acrisure Stadium and just blow it up. Right? They could bring out Luke Ravenstall as a kicker, have Hines Ward return the kick, and blow up the stadium. And the calls to sports talk radio would still be, what do they do? What should they do with George Pickens? It's just inevitable. Now, it's unfortunate for Pitt that in the midst of their best start in 33 years, it's the worst confluence of events happening next door in the South Side that's going to get all of the attention. It's just the way it goes. And there's nothing you can do about it. And we know that. We've seen that over the years. I don't think I'm breaking news to anyone. I think everybody understands it. The only thing Pitt can do is keep winning. And if they keep winning, and if the Steelers keep struggling, or even if they don't, but if Pitt keeps winning and they get to 6-0, 7-0, 8-0, whatever it may be, and they've got Clemson coming in here and they're still undefeated when that game happens, it's going to be a big topic. And quite frankly, it'll be a big topic even before they get to that. If they can beat Cal, they'll be 6-0. If they beat Syracuse that following Thursday, they'll be 7-0. And by the way, the fact that there's an off weekend, that they have this game tomorrow and then an off weekend before the Thursday night game against Syracuse, that doesn't help either, because when you're not playing games, you're going to get less notice. But if they keep winning, they'll get more and more notice locally. I think they're getting more and more notice nationally. If they keep winning, they'll get more and more notice locally. I wouldn't waste too much time worrying about it. For one thing, we give you plenty of Pitt sports talk right here on the Morning Pitt. Maybe it only gets you 20 minutes. It only gets you 20 minutes out of your commute during the day, but it gives you something to do. Plus, we have the Panther-Lair show on Wednesday night, so you can listen to that as well. We'll have our post-game show tomorrow night you can check out in addition. And, of course, the way to make sure you don't miss any of those things, the Morning Pitt videos or our live streams, is to subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. But it's just the reality of it. It's just the reality of the sports scene in Pittsburgh. Steelers are number one. Everything else falls in behind. And look, You might think Pitt gets disrespected. If the Penguins fall apart, if they fall back to how bad they were 20 years ago, they'll fall down that pecking order as well. I would contend that in the fall of 2003, at least the early portion of the fall of 2003, Pitt was probably a bigger story and a more prominent sports topic in Pittsburgh than the Penguins were. Steelers are number one. Pirates and Penguins will kind of flip-flop based on who's winning or who's the worst, and Pitt will fall in there. Pitt makes itself relevant and keeps itself relevant with success. And that's a big part of why Pitt has fallen off the sports agenda in Pittsburgh over the past however many years, is because they've just sort of been, as the kids would say, mid. Well, this year they're not mid. This year they're 5-0, and as long as they keep winning and having some of the exceptional individual performances they've had, they'll keep climbing that totem pole locally. So it doesn't matter. Ultimately, it's irrelevant. The only thing that matters is how they play tomorrow afternoon at Acrisure Stadium against Cal. But I think it does bug Pitt fans sometimes that Pitt doesn't seem to get more attention and more respect when they're having the kind of success they've been having. Well, keep having that success, and the attention and the respect will come. For now, let's take some questions about Pitt for the Morning Pitt Mailbag here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Sorry, every now and then I just have to preach a little bit, get up in the pulpit and, give a little sermon, and that's what we did there for the last 5 minutes. I just feel like it's relevant to talk about, partially because it's a topic on the message boards, partially because I'm driving around and I'm hearing it too. I put on the sports talk radio, and a lot of the talks about the Steelers because of that confluence of events of, they're really hitting the trifecta of the losing streak, the quarterback controversy, and the guy who's not playing the right way, which I don't know which one of those draws the most phone calls in Pittsburgh. I think it's probably a pretty even split. But we know what we have here. We have the Morning Pitt Mailbag, where we take your questions and answer them here on the Friday edition of the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. As always, like this video and subscribe. And as always, make sure you check out Homefield. Now, I'm about to show you something that I'm going to put this image on the screen, and it might cover my face, and that's okay because it's pretty incredible. Look at that. Look at that sweet, sweet pullover. That's from Homefield at Homefield.apparel.com. They've got a lot of schools. They have a lot of schools that they represent at Homefield.apparel.com. These jackets, I'm pointing at it, but my hand is behind the image, so you can't see it. These pullovers that they've got a handful of ACC schools and schools, some of the biggest schools across the country. Obviously, they have Pitt. I mean, it is ridiculously good looking. I mean, that is a beautiful, beautiful pullover. I mean, I would wager that's got to be nicer than any pullover you've got in your current collection. And as the weather has gotten cooler this week, it looks like the perfect thing to wear to the game tomorrow and maybe the Syracuse game on Thursday night in a couple weeks. This is the perfect pullover, and you can get it at homefieldapparel.com. I'm going to leave it on the screen for another minute or so, and probably by the end of that, you'll have already gone and opened a new browser tab and gone to homefieldapparel.com to get that sweet, beautiful pullover. There's a word I want to say, you sweet, beautiful, but we're a kids program here, or we're for the whole family, so I'm not going to say any swear words. But I mean, look at that. It is really, really sweet, and that's what you get at Homefield. Some of the best Pitt gear and college sports gear you're going to find. Homefieldapparel.com. Remember, use the promo code PIT24 and you can get 15% off that excellent, excellent pullover. Homefieldapparel.com, promo code PIT24. All right, I can get back to my regular seat now since that thing's not taking up the whole screen, and we can jump into our mailbag questions here. First question is from Smenges. Says, what grade would you give the offensive line for the UNC game and the season to date? How would you say the O-line injury backups have performed? As O-line injury backups, who's been an injury backup? I think, Jason Collier basically for Ryan Jacoby. Otherwise, Taylor, Bear, and Williams, were expected starters this year. Lyndon Cooper won the starting job. Terrence Moore came in for him for a little bit, but I think Cooper was back in by the end of the Carolina game. So, injury backups there. I guess Terrence Enos came in late for Branson Taylor, so we'll keep an eye on that one. Overall, I thought the offensive line was okay. I know there were no sacks allowed in the North Carolina game, but Eli Holstein recorded, am I looking at his rushing here? 12 rushing attempts. Wait, let me get the official stats. I was looking at Pro Football Focus because they kind of break it down into scrambles. Officially, Eli Holstein had 10 rushing attempts. According to Pro Football Focus, somehow they have him with 12 rushing attempts. I'm not exactly sure how they calculate that. Only about 3 of them were scrambles. A handful were designed runs. I think Eli Holstein is doing what a lot of people said that Kenny Pickett did in 2021, that he made the offensive line look maybe a little bit better than they were because of his ability to run and keep a play alive, either to scramble for a first down or to keep a play alive and run outside the pocket and throw the ball downfield. I don't want to discredit the offensive line too much because I think those guys are doing okay and getting better. But I do think they've got a quarterback who's mobile. They've got a quarterback who can break a tackle, who can spin out of the pocket and make plays on the run, which is what they had in 2021, which is what most good teams have, is a quarterback who can make something out of nothing. That's one of my favorite phrases this week. Not that this is the first week I've ever heard that phrase, but I'm really enjoying that phrase this week. And so Holstein is doing that. And so when I look at the game where, they didn't give up any sacks, that doesn't necessarily mean they didn't give up any pressure. Eli Holstein was still under pressure in that game. Let me actually bring up the pressure stats of Pro Football Focus, how many pressures they credited North Carolina with. Looks like about 14 pressures credited to North Carolina's defensive players. And so they were getting after him. He was, obviously there were a couple holding penalties that were taken that helped prevent a sack. Even Ryan Baer, by his own admission, there was he got beat physically, but there was a mental error, a communication error that left somebody running free. And look, if you have the choice between giving up 10 yards on a penalty because you take a hold, or just letting that guy run free and letting him kill your quarterback, you take the 10 yards and the penalty, which is the business decision that Ryan Baer made. And that's fine. I think most people would endorse that decision. So I think they've been okay. A letter grade, I mean, I guess I would C plus, B minus, somewhere around there. Probably B minus or C plus. I would say. I don't think they were great, but I thought they were good enough. And look, if you have a quarterback like Eli Holstein, you can be good enough and still get a successful offensive performance, which is ultimately what happened. Pittman1973 says, on last week's mailbag video, you answered a question about the effect of Pitt not currently having an athletic director on Pitt's recruiting. Part of the question was about the athletic director's role in NIL conversations. Your answer was that the AD and coaches are not involved in the conversations. A major reason Heather Lyke was fired was because she did not embrace NIL. So what is the role of the AD and coaches in the NIL process? Is raising money the only NIL role for the AD, and aren't we falling behind because we don't have one? While the coaches may not be directly talking to the players, aren't they saying which players they want and prioritizing the players when allocating the NIL money? I'm not going to be naive and claim that the coaches are not aware of NIL goings on. I don't know if they are. I don't know how directly and sort of specifically they're involved with allocations or negotiations. I think a lot of those things do happen. I think there's an awareness and then there's an active role. And I think they have the former, but maybe not as much of the latter. In terms of the athletic director and the athletic department and the involvement in NIL, it's not so much negotiations. It's not so much allocations. It's about facilitating, enhancing, and doing whatever they can to help. I think, the rules have changed this year, and athletic departments and schools are able to do more in terms of getting money to the collectives and, for NIL usage. That wasn't the case, a year ago. But even when that wasn't the case, I think there were things the athletic department could do to help with NIL efforts. And it wasn't so much on the side of getting the money to the recruits or transfers or whoever it may be. It was more about helping the collective rally support among the donor base and helping the collective connect with the donor base to get that money, into the collective that could then be put out to the players to help, acquire and retain talent. And I think the athletic department was falling short in that regard, even prior to this year when they could become more actively involved in actually getting money to the collective, which I think they also fell short in that regard. And I think you could probably find people who would tell you that in the weeks, has it been a month now, however long since Heather Lyke was fired, some doors that were previously closed have opened. And so I don't think it's adversely, the absence of an athletic director is adversely affecting or impacting that process of talent acquisition or talent retention to whatever extent you're involved in that right now. It's in the middle of the season, so you're maybe not as involved as you are at other points in the calendar year. Now, I will also say the athletic department is not entirely headless here. They're not leaderless. Jen Toscano is the acting athletic director, the interim athletic director, whatever title they gave her. That's not just a that's not just to put on the resume. That's not just whatever you want to call it, an empty title. I think she's actively overseeing the activity of the athletic department. She's actively overseeing what the athletic department does, and she's guiding the athletic department. And she'll continue to hold that role until a permanent athletic or a full-time athletic director is hired. And so some of those decisions that would need to be made about the athletic department's involvement with the collective are being made. So I don't think Pitt, to the extent that you can be involved with acquiring transfers or retaining your talented players right now in the middle of the season, week 7 of the college football season, which I don't think you're quite as involved in those activities and movement or lack of movement or negotiations right now. To the extent that, the collective can be involved in those things, I don't think there's any holdup from the athletic department. I think, if anything, the athletic department is probably facilitating more than they did, say, 2 months ago. Pitt 123 Zoo says, "Give me this week's parlay, shill." Don't know what that means. Or maybe shill is signing. I don't know. So this week's parlay. So last week I gave out my picks on all the ACC games and blew just about every single one of them. I think I got Syracuse and I got Pitt, and everything else I think I missed the cover. So here, I'll give you my picks real quick. There's, hold on, I closed my screen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games in the ACC this weekend. Clemson is at Wake Forest. According to ESPN's lines, Clemson is favored by 20.5. I'm going to take Wake Forest to cover that. I think Clemson will win and win comfortably. I don't know if they'll win by 3 touchdowns or not. Georgia Tech is at North Carolina. Georgia Tech is -4. I think they'll cover that one. I don't think Carolina is very good, and I still think Georgia Tech's pretty dangerous. Stanford is at Notre Dame. Notre Dame -23 against Stanford. I'm still not entirely sure how great Notre Dame is. I think they're good. I think they're better than Stanford, and I think they'll win. I don't know if they'll win by 23 points. So I'm going to take Stanford +23 on that one. Louisville -7.5 at Virginia. Virginia's a plucky little team, man. They're a resilient little group. They're at home getting 7.5. I hadn't really thought about that. Give me a second on that one. Syracuse is at NC State in the 8 o'clock game on the ACC network. Syracuse is -3.5. I think Syracuse covers that. I think NC State is reeling, and Kyle McCord is really good. And so I think Syracuse covers 3.5. Of course, I didn't mention Pitt, -3.5 against Cal. My prediction for the Pitt game, and I'll write this will be in the 3-2-1 column later today too. If Eli Holstein throws more than one interception, Pitt will lose. And that's not about, of course, if you lose the turnover battle. I think Cal will get one off of Eli Holstein. I wouldn't be surprised if they get one in the first quarter. I actually said this to Stephen Thompson and Jerry DePaula yesterday. I said I wouldn't be surprised if Eli Holstein throws an interception in the first quarter tomorrow and then 2 touchdowns in the second quarter. Like I think Cal will get him early on one, kind of like North Carolina did. And then it'll really be a question of whether he throws. If he throws another one, then I think Pitt's going to lose. If Eli Holstein only throws 1 pick, or 0, obviously, then I think Pitt wins. And I think if Pitt wins, they'll cover 3.5. So I'm going to take Pitt -3.5. And then the Louisville Virginia game, I still really believe in Louisville. Virginia's been a surprise. They're 4-1. They're kind of resilient. I mean, they look as good as they've looked in a while, maybe 5 years. I'll take Virginia. I almost said I'll take Louisville. I'll take Virginia to cover 7.5 at home, +7.5. I'll take them. So we got we got Wake Forest +20.5, Georgia Tech -4, Stanford +23, Pitt -3.5, Virginia +7.5, and Syracuse -3.5. Those are the picks. Do not bet any of them, or you are more than welcome and maybe even encouraged to Costanza me and just bet the opposite of everything I just said. Potter County native says, where do you think in the final rankings of these other point guards do you think you might rank Jalen Lowe upon ending his Pitt career? Brandon Knight, Levance Fields, Ashton Gibbs, and going back, Sean Miller, Curtis Aiken, Vonteco Cummings. Maybe I should also include such notables as Kenny Wagner and Pete Strickland. I mean, I'm going to limit myself just to like the Hallen Dixon era, like the Hallen era to present. We're going back 20 years there. And so I'll just look at that group of Brandon Knight, Levance Fields, Carl Krauser, who you didn't mention, Ashton Gibbs, Bub Carrington, Jalen Lowe, Nelly Cummings. I mean, there have been good point guards who come through here. Look, I mean, to me, Brandon Knight is always the gold standard. Even if Lance Fields made some huge clutch baskets, Brandon Knight is the gold standard. And I'm not sure if someone will ever pass him just because of what he meant. I mean, not just his play on the court, off on both ends of the court, but because of what he meant to this program and those teams he was on. So I don't think I could put Lowe above Knight. You know what? I have a hard time with this. I don't know. Like, I need to see what he does this year. I mean, he's played a great half season, and it was great, but it was a half season. Like, we need a full season out of Jalen Lowe, and I think you're going to get it, and I think he's going to be awesome this year, and I think he's going to, it's a legitimate conversation we could have at the end of this year, but right now, I can't go quite that far. Pat Mac 59 says, I know we're only 5 games into the season, but is this the most surprised you've been by a Pitt football or basketball team in a good way or bad way since you started covering them? Or are there any other seasons to compare in either sport? I mean, like, so we're 5 games in, so it would be like, I don't know if you're talking just about a team that starts off really strong, but I mean, I would say 2 years ago basketball was a pretty big surprise, maybe one of the more surprising seasons I've covered. Because you think about like Jeff Capel was on the verge of getting fired, after his 4th season. And it really felt like the only thing keeping him in his job was his buyout. Not patience or faith or belief or any of those other things that we're told, but I think it was his buyout. And I think if the buyout was less or they could raise the money to do it, they would have bought him out and fired him. I really believe that after his first 4 seasons. And so that was sort of what you thought. And you go into the next season, you're like, okay, so you've had these 4 miserable seasons and you're going to bounce back with this local guy, which is a cool story, but he's coming from Colgate. This shooter from Marquette who never really did anything at Marquette. And this guy who, seriously, this guy who hasn't played basketball in 2 years. Plus these Spanish guys. And, I mean, at least you'll have John Hughley. That's the best thing you've got going for you. And so that was the thought going in. And it was and you got Jamarius Burton back, who seems like a nice player, but he was on that team last year that was pretty bad. So, that was the thought going into 2 seasons ago, to year 5 for Jeff Capel. And, never expected any of the success that they ended up enjoying. And I don't know, I think probably the biggest surprise that year was Blake Hinson. Who knew that guy was going to become that guy? It was a pretty big surprise. I mean, that's a pretty recent example. I mean, any of the really extreme success that Pitt's enjoyed has been a surprise. I mean, the 2021 ACC championship team, I thought they could be good. It was certainly a big deal that Kenny Pickett was coming back. I didn't think they would be that good. I never really thought the 2018 team, it's funny, I mean, that wins the Coastal, there was so much hype that offseason for Kenny Pickett. I would say, that was a season where you had surprise within the season after the 51-6 game and the disappointing loss at Carolina of all places, and then getting, beat up at UCF. It was like, oh, this team's a disaster. So it ended up being a big surprise within that season. 2009 was a football season where you entered that year with pretty low expectations, largely based on the Sun Bowl. Even though that 2008 team went 9-4, they were coming directly out of the Sun Bowl. They were going to have Bill Stahl back. These were not good things, and they end up, one of the most successful seasons Pitt's had, this century. And so those will be a few that come to mind. I do think the basketball team 2 years ago was probably one of the biggest surprises I can remember. This year's football team starting off 5-0, it's right up there. It's right up on that list. All right, there's a couple. All right, we got 3 more questions that got posted by the time we went to press, so to speak. So I'm going to get all 3 of these because I like them. Zenmeister 1992 says, I was wondering if you had any thoughts on the proposed Project Rudy for college athletics. So Project Rudy, one of the recent sort of Super League ideas, 70 teams kind of becoming their own entity. They won't play against any G5 or FCS schools, and They all split the money pot and all that kind of stuff and largely keep the conferences intact. I mean, my first reaction to any of these super leagues is I just have a hard time seeing the SEC and Big Ten going along with it. Now, I understand this Project Rudy aims to keep the conferences largely intact. I forget if it would be an equal media revenue distribution or if there would be something sort of prorated for some of the schools that bring in more of that money. But I have a hard time seeing, like right now, the SEC and the Big Ten are sitting on top of a giant, like that pile of cash in the Batman movie. You know what I mean? That the Joker stole from all the mob guys. Like that's the SEC and Big Ten. They're sitting on top of that. I don't know why they would want to be like, all right, we've got this giant pile. Let's break it down into smaller piles to share with everyone else. I don't see why they would want to do that. I think, and I don't necessarily think this is going to happen either, but I think it's far more likely that the SEC and Big Ten would just say, we'll just do our own thing. And we'll have our own 30 teams or 36 teams, and we'll just get all the money. And the rest of you, screw you guys, we're going home. I think that's more likely. I feel like that's more likely than the SEC and Big Ten saying, let's all come together. Let's all be part of one big super league. I just have a hard time envisioning it. Now, I don't know all the exact details of this. Obviously you need to get Notre Dame involved, and I think Jack Swarbrick is part of this conversation, and that would be a big game changer if you could pull that off. But I have a hard time buying a super league when the SEC and Big Ten could just have it all themselves. Next question. Well, where is it? Why'd I close the page? Here, Jay Leisinger says, if you had to pick one guy who left early for the NFL draft last year between MJ Devonshire and Bub Means for this year's roster, who would you go with? I actually think that Means is probably more impactful, but Devonshire would shore up the cornerbacks. That's a great question. I think the corners have been fine. With Rylan Gandy and Rashad Battle and Tamon Lynam. I think it's interesting that you picked Devonshire because I think Marquez Williams was better last year than Devonshire was as a cover corner. So, that might sway me a little bit. Bub Means, you know me, Bub Means hype train driver over here. I think he's a big piece of the puzzle. I think he could be really good. I think he was really good for the final 8 games last year. He would be great in this offense, but they're already great in this offense. You know what I mean? Like they've got 4 really good wide receivers. I mean, you could add another piece of for depth, and you would have 5 really good wide receivers before you even get to Dejon Reynolds, and then Desmond Reed as a receiving option and Gavin Bartholomew. So you just get even more dangerous, I guess, on offense. But Marquez Williams, I think, could be a really nice piece to add to the corners. I don't know. I might lean toward Means just a little bit, but not by much. All right, final one. Rhino527 says the percentage chance that Eli Holstein and Cade Bell are both at Pitt next year. We've had these kind of conversations every week about what can they do to keep these guys here? What can they do to keep these guys at Pitt? Will they come up with the money for Cade Bell? Will they come up with the money for Eli Holstein? I think there's a better than 50% chance both of those guys are here. Not based on anything. I'm checking my phone here. They didn't text me. I don't have any text from Eli Holstein or Cade Bell. We're not on a group chat. So I don't I'm just I don't see them going. You know what I mean? I think particularly the success that Pitt is enjoying here, and also I think they'll do what's necessary. I think they'll be able to be competitive with Cade Bell salary-wise if an increase is needed. And I think they should be able to be competitive with Eli Holstein as well. Both of those guys, if they continue on the trajectory they're currently on, are going to have offers to go play and coach somewhere else for a lot more money than they're going to get at Pitt. That's just the reality. But the other reality is that, again, I've talked about this a lot. Like football and basketball, the guys that they've gotten, the guys that they've held on to, have more often than not taken a discount to be here, and there's a lot of reasons why. And I think Holstein and Bell sort of strike me as the type who would probably do that. They would get more than they're getting this year, but less than they could get somewhere else to stay here and continue being a part of this. So I would say better than even. I can't say a specific number, 95%, 85, 75, but I would say more than 50% chance that they'll be here next year. That's my guess, but just a guess. Thanks so much for the questions. These were great questions this week. It's always a lot of fun to do this. Don't forget to go to Homefield apparel.com. Use the promo code PIT24 to get 15% off your first order. And, of course, like this video and subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, so you never miss any of our Pitt video content. Tomorrow night, we will be live. We're shooting for 9 o'clock. I think is going to be the time we're hoping to start the post-game show. It'll be right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, so tune in for that. We'll drink. We'll talk Pitt football. Should be a lot of fun. We'll go for a couple hours if we need to. We've been going about 90 minutes or so so far this season. I imagine we'll be right around there because this is going to be a huge game, an interesting game, and one way or the other, no matter what happens, we are going to have a ton to talk about. So make sure you tune in tomorrow night, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Thanks so much for watching the video today. Thanks for watching the videos all week. I hope you've had a great week. I hope you have a great Friday, and we will talk to you tomorrow night after the game right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.